The consumer is expecting a personalized tailor experience end to end.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook presented by Uptick and Attentive. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 127, and my guest is Michael Diesu. Michael is the co-founder and CEO of Tie, formerly Revenue Roll. He shared his insights on what it's like to make a move from one industry to another, why it happened and what he was looking for when making the change, what it's like to start a company, and the challenges that you face along the way that you could never have predicted, and the learnings he has from his family background and the entrepreneurial spirit that was seemingly bred in him. And he's a Mets fan, so we enjoyed some conversation about our visits to Shea Stadium in the day. Enjoy the show. Before we get started, a quick thank you, as always, to Max Brandstetter of the Wild Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Michael Diesu. Michael is a third-generation entrepreneur and co-founder and CEO of Tie, formerly Revenue Roll. Prior to co-founding Tie, he was an Accenture strategist, advising Fortune 500 executives on growth strategies and M&A. Born and raised in New York, Michael's a recent transplant to Morningside, Miami. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
My pleasure. Thanks for making the time. So I'm a Florida guy in addition to a New Jersey guy. Where is Morningside as a part of Miami?
Do you know where a design district is?
Yeah, sure.
I'm a little bit north and a little bit east of that.
Okay, good. I don't think I've ever heard of Morningside.
It's a little secluded area, recently made famous by Dave Portnoy, who walks his dog in there all the time and has a house there. But it was a quiet secret for a long time till he moved there.
And is he scouting out pizza places down there?
I don't know. I don't follow his pizza journey as much as I probably should, but he definitely spends quite a bit of time in Miami these days.
Okay, cool. As our listeners know, we start the show getting the background from our guest, their first story, if you will. You have an interesting one. So share with the listeners, kind of how you grew up and what might have suggested your career would take the shape that it has.
Yeah, I think, growing up in a working class family, an entrepreneurial family, my dad has run an exterminating business since I was born, recently exited that. But I think growing up with entrepreneurs as parents, my mother was also a high school teacher. So really taught me early on that, you can kind of structure and build your life the way you want to. And I think watching him balance the pressure and the stresses of entrepreneurship while still being a present parent was really inspiring for me. And I always knew that I wanted to kind of define, my own life and make my own way. So that's really what brought me into entrepreneurship.
You mentioned your dad, maybe your parents being able to, have this work-life balance. How has that played a role in your company, the roles that you've played in finding that work-life balance that we all talk so much about?
I think it's all about being present, right? When he was working, right? And it could be till a very late hour like myself these days. But when it was family time, right? When it was time to have dinner, there was no cell phones. Obviously, there's no cell phones when I was a kid, but there was no distractions. And, when it was time to, come to a game or go to some event at school, they were present. And so I think that's also the times there wasn't 24/7 notifications ringing in your pocket. But there's a lesson there from that time and that era here in the United States, which is, you were out of the office and you were truly out of the office. And when you were in it, you were grinding, you were crushing, and you were doing everything you needed to do.
Yeah, that is very different. My dad was a laborer and he was very present. He coached my little league, from the time I was, 5 years old until I was 15, I guess. He was around a lot. And you're right, the distractions were very, very limited. So That's a good, one of the things in the show here, we try to give people three key takeaways that they can take back to their personal or their professional lives. And, we talk about networking and all kinds of different things. And certainly that concept of work-life balance and being present when you are on the personal stuff is important. So that's a great point. I think that the notes had mentioned third generation entrepreneur. So grandparents were at it also.
My grandfather owned that exterminating business. So my father worked with his father from when he was in his 20s. I've observed it. They worked together when I was a kid. Eventually, my grandfather retired. But I got to see that, that family dynamic and, running a business with a family. And I think deep down, that's still something I would love to do, with my son, maybe with my father one day. But I think there's really nothing, more, inspiring than providing for your own, providing for your family, but doing it with them. So it's not common, but I did grow up observing that. And in the back of my head, I'm always thinking, maybe there's something that I could do with my family in the future.
That's nice. That's really nice. We talked a little bit before we jumped on the show about the Mets. And for listeners, we're recording this in early July, and the Mets have fallen on hard times. I came to find that Michael is also a Mets fan, and he grew up. I guess you grew up at both Shea and Citi Field.
Yeah, that's right. So my dad used to take me to games when I was a little kid. Actually, his uncle was actually a pitcher for the Dodgers at one point in like their minor league system back when they were the Brooklyn Dodgers. And obviously, that didn't pan out. He went to he was drafted and didn't end up playing after he came home. But we always had an affinity to baseball in my family, and there's no way I'm going to root for the Yankees. And so it was a pretty it was a binary decision. If you're going to follow baseball in my family, you're going to be a Met fan.
Yeah, that's how it was in my family. My dad was a Brooklyn Dodger fan. He made me a Mets fan. I've made my son a Mets fan. And as we discussed, my son is about your age. He and his twin sister, and we are avid Met fans. We're a little hard times right now, but hopefully we'll get it back on track.
I mean, it just shows you money isn't everything, Mark. You can have $1 billion, but it doesn't mean you're going to win. So there's some
Absolutely.
grit and heart that needs to go with it.
Couldn't agree more. Going back to just your early life, you have mentioned being kind of a shy kid, but competitive. How has that kind of played out in, the entrepreneurial world for you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up pretty introverted, I would say. I was always put in situations to socialize, so I wouldn't say I was, not social, but I think that my default behavior is to be introverted, and I think it's historically taken me a bit to kind of come out of my shell. Now it's, was a weakness, and now I've really tried to hone it into a superpower to connect with others. But as a kid, right, if you're not super outgoing, you need to find things to channel, right, and focus on. And for me, at an early age, that became school. And I'll give you a little anecdote. I was in first grade, had my first test ever. It was like a 20-word spelling bee or spelling test. And I came home with 19 out of 20 correct. And what does my dad say to me? Why didn't you get 100? And so, or why didn't you get, 20 out of 20? And I'm like first grade, single digit age, immediately gamified school and just made me super focused on being the best. Some would say that parenting strategy isn't ideal, but it was the 90s and, it is what it is. And then coupled with that, my grandfather, who I mentioned, worked with my dad, started to give me $5 for every 100% score that I brought home. Something I will definitely do with my son. Easy money, because he maybe gave me a few $100s over those early years, but it quickly translated success and hard work with reward. And so I think that's really what got me going to be competitive early on.
It's funny, you mentioned spelling tests, and all I could think about is all through my elementary, when you had a spelling test, they gave you a white sheet of paper, you had to fold it in half the long way, and you had to write 10 words. The teacher would say, all right, the word is purple, and you had to write purple on 10 on the left side, 10 on the right side. That's how they graded it. That's exactly what I thought of as soon as you started talking about spelling tests. So
that's the exact kind of paper we use. So I think we grew up near each other, because that's a very similar teaching style, I think, in the Long Island or East New Jersey area.
Yeah, I grew up in Brooklyn, so
There you go.
there you go. Let's talk about your early career at Accenture. Was that right out of school?
Yeah, I interned there the last summer or the junior summer. I had a great internship. As I mentioned earlier in the show, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I knew that I didn't know everything. And so for me, a career in either consulting or banking was going to give me a toolkit, so that I could one day operate a business. Even if I didn't truly know that deep down, I think that's what my gut was telling me, was to go work for a firm that gives you a ton of experience, a ton of skills, so that you have the confidence and the ability to run your own business.
You talk about toolkit. I think that's an important aspect of everything that we do. Are there a few tools that you might call out that you came away from Accenture honing?
I worked for some of the best salesmen that I've ever seen. And remember, these are deals for millions of dollars for us to build a PowerPoint that the CEO couldn't build himself, right? So what you're really selling is prestige, right? And frame and expertise. And I think it really taught me, how to position and how to frame selling statements, and also to go through a negotiation. I think that was step one, right? Is watching these partners sell who have been doing it for years. But then also, I think what I've learned is, we'll come in with a recommendation, classic consulting style, 90-day engagement. Here's this 20-page PowerPoint so that you can fix your company. We'll take $1 million. Thank you. But the next step was getting the buy-in from the other executives, right? And socializing it. And I think that's a big part of what executives do today, is that they have an idea, but now they have to, deliver on consensus, right? Or get that consensus from the group to buy into it and execute on it. And I was able to watch, ringside, some of the best CEOs take our plan that we agreed on with him or her, and then also have to execute it next. So I think that was a really great skill. And the third thing was obviously just like boot camp skills, Excel models, PowerPoint, did details, right? And that was ingrained in me pretty early.
And was there a client or two or multiple clients that were in the retail space that you engaged with?
So I was working in CPG to start. So that was like Mondelez, was one of our big customers. Also Kraft Heinz. Basically, these engagements were called zero-based organization and zero-based budgeting, which you may have heard of. 3G Capital is a big proponent of this and the businesses that they buy alongside Warren Buffett. But it basically taking a clean sheet of a business and going line by line and saying, do we need this or not? And oftentimes it's not. And so I think, and my team can attest, is that, every quarter or every month, I actually do a similar exercise where it's like, do you need this software? If I took it away from you, right, what would you do? Or do you need this resource or contractor? And so it taught me, like, working with those big companies when there was 3 commas in the Excel spreadsheet with these costs. It taught me pretty early to make the most out of every dollar of investment.
I love the zero-based budgeting thing. I got my background, my start of my career as a CPA. And so, and I always say to people, don't hold that against me. I was fortunate enough to get a good education, in that area, but then moved into a private company, a startup business. I did some finance there, but then moved into marketing. But what I've always been amazed is so many of the companies, almost none of the companies that I have been in go anywhere near a zero-based budget. It's oftentimes, some increase over the prior year, maybe some increase in sales to cover the increased costs, as opposed to, being as specific as you. I think more businesses would be more successful for a longer period of time if they did that. Because what I have tended to see is they get fat, they get fat, they get fat, and then they have big layoffs and big cutbacks, as opposed to being stricter over time. So I love the zero-based budgeting. Good call.
I think it's really all about incentives, Mark, right? And we can get more into this, but that's really how I think about it, is like a lot of CEOs and partners that I worked with at Accenture would be focused on, like, what are the incentives? What are people incentivized to do? Because that is what's going to happen. And I think that bloat happens is because they have to chase, revenue targets or acquisition targets without having an incentive to do it profitably.
We'll talk about your current business in a second, and maybe we'll put a pin in that conversation of, being a early stage company that's been recently funded and how important it is to grow, and some of those things. So we'll come back to that. But was there as you were progressing, at Accenture, and that's kind of a foundational role in your career, as I like to call it. You were there for 5 years. Was there this aha moment during that time when you said, I know what I want to do next?
I think there was a time where I thought to myself, I'm ready to do something on my own, right? And I was there for about 5.5, 6 years. I would say that last year, I was kind of scanning for opportunity or ideas to take that next step. But I think that you do engagements again and again, and I was lucky to do ZBO work or ZBB work, right? But also M&A work and revenue growth strategy. That I felt like I had really experienced a lot of what a C-suite experience is after 5 years, and it was time to look for that next thing.
If you're in e-commerce and focused on profitability, you need to know about Uptick. Uptick has been quietly helping brands unlock serious revenue where most people aren't even looking. Uptick is transforming the way e-commerce brands monetize their users through post-purchase ads. Uptick's clients are adding an extra 30 to 60 cents in pure profit per order. I've personally witnessed many brands using Uptick, most of which are adding between $500,000 and $1 million annually in profit without any change to the customer purchase experience. In a world where CACs are exploding, tariffs are in place, and margins are getting squeezed, Uptick's focus on profitability is exactly what many brands need right now. If you're looking to unlock hidden revenue streams with minimal effort, check out uptick.com. All right, so let's talk about Tie, formerly Revenue Roll. Let's start with exactly what you guys do. Then we'll get into some of the funding, name change, things like that.
So Tie, formerly Revenue Roll, founded in 2021. We are an enrichment and activation platform. So basically, what we do is help marketers targeting consumers to better understand their audiences, right? With their PII, demographics, psychographics, even intent data, and give them all the tools they need to send the right message at the right time to the right person.
If I'm a brand, call it brand X, and I've got a website, how are you engaging with the traffic on my website? And what kind of messages are you, in fact, sending to consumers?
The first step is we would look at like, where is the drop off, right? There's probably a large part of that traffic that is leaving or bouncing, and they may be added to cart or they looked at multiple products, and we would call them high intent. And so the first step is to recover in a compliant way the ability to retarget them, whether that's through ads or email. And then once we can recover them, right, and identify them as Mark Friedman, we provide additional context, right? What is his age, his gender, marital status, right? Does he have children? Things like that. And also tell you, is he shopping for similar goods to brand X? All of that data can be sent to your CDP, to your ESP, so that these top marketers can make intelligent decisions, right? Personalized, tailored flows, personalized email campaigns, and ad campaigns. Because that's really where this whole space is going, Mark, is that the consumer is expecting a personalized tailor experience end to end, from the ad campaign that got them to click all the way to the email flow that gets them to purchase. Our tool powers all of that top to bottom.
You talked about a bunch of data that you get. What's the source of that data?
Yeah, so we have partnerships with publisher networks, right? Think newspapers, magazines, newsletter senders. And we also have partnerships with credit agencies, Experian, TransUnion. And then we also have connections to DSPs, think like the Trade Desk. And all of those sources can give us demographic data, even psychographic data. And then the DSPs can give us intent data, right? What ads are they clicking on today? And so we pool together all of these sources, and our AI can form profiles from these disconnected data points into one comprehensive Mark Friedman profile with all of this information that's actionable.
We made it to 18 minutes in the show and AI finally came up. So that's good. One of the important things you called out also, you used the term in a compliant way. So what does that mean for the consumer? What does that mean for the brand?
Yeah, I think that in our space, there are strategies that we would call data co-ops, which is if brand X, Y, and Z all signed up with Tie or a Tie competitor, the data of those three brands would be pooled together, right? And this is how a lot of folks in our space have gotten into trouble. And generally, what we try to do is to not have a data co-op. Specifically, we're buying data where the user has opted in to share that with our network. That's the first step, is we don't pool data. Our data is a one-way street. We have acquired it from our partners. We can share it with our subscribers, but it is a double opt-in, right? The second point of opt-in is that on the brand's website, they have to accept tracking. They have to accept that the brand can store their information. And only if we get both of those opt-ins on site and in our network would we share any data with our brands.
So if a customer came to my website and they had opted into receiving cookies on their machine, everybody must know by now that you get this annoying pop-up that asks you to accept or deny cookies. If I've never visited that site before, is it possible that working with a tool like yours that I will get a marketing email from that brand based upon my acceptance of the cookies and your information?
If you have accepted cookies, like in the state of California or Colorado, you've accepted that your brand can store the information. Now, what they can do is also see if that person has opted in to share their data with networks like ours. And so they are able to email you because in the United States, CAM spam policy is an opt-out or an unsubscribe system. Whereas SMS and text is very different. It's much more strict. And so our product can help SMS, but just reactivating folks that may have gone quiet in your already opted in list. Whereas with email, you actually have a bit more opportunity to contact these high intent folks. But if they obviously unsubscribe or opt out, we would take them out of the list and out of our network.
I've got some other questions that I think will help the listeners, also understand what you do. But let's talk about the rebranding that you just did from Revenue Roll to Tie. What was behind that?
Totally. So we have just released a even better version of our graph, way more high powered, built on new and improved data sources. The AI got an upgrade as well that's forming the profiles. So you're going to see a dramatic increase in the potency and effectiveness of our identity graph. And so we looked at it as an opportunity alongside this upcoming fundraising announcement to rebrand the business and rename it to a name that is most aligned with that new vision. And so previously Revenue Roll was because our product was helping you to increase revenue, right? At an early stage and nascent stage, it made sense. But Tie is really fundamentally what our product does. It ties together data points from these different sources. It ties those profiles to all of your marketing channels. And so we took it as an opportunity to really position ourselves for the long term here.
When you pitch to potential customers and they ask about measurement, how am I going to know whether or not working with Tie is going to produce a return on the investment? How do you help them think through that?
I think that first step is, right, where is your email function today, right? So if your email function is still in early stages, maybe you don't have abandonment flows or regular campaigns being sent today, it does not matter how many folks that we can identify for you, right? It doesn't matter how much gasoline you put in the car. If it's not working, it's not going to work, right? Or it's not going to drive. And so that's step one. And oftentimes there's an expert agency in place who we work really well with. And that's check one, is that, the marketing function is in a good spot and ready for growth. And then check two is how much site traffic is coming today, because we will identify 40 to 50% of that traffic to help grow your list and reactivate your list. Generally, we like to see north of 50 to 100,000 site visitors per month.
The match rate that you mentioned, is that one of the competitive advantages or one of the things that, when you're talking to a brand about the competition, do you feel like you have a higher match rate than others?
Well, we can identify 90% of traffic. That is how big our graph is. We have over 300 million folks in our owned graph, proprietary graph. But we actually score that data extensively. And we actually are filtering only on folks that match two criteria. The first is, are they showing intent on site, right? Are they clicking around? Are they spending enough time? The second is, are they matching your ICP profile? If you sell women's clothing, you probably don't want us to identify men, in a crude example, right? And so we actually temper, right, or lessen the ID rate because we're only focusing on the high intent ICP, right, ideal customer profile on your site.
Imagine getting a message from your favorite brand that feels like it was created just for you. That's the kind of personalized experience Attentive helps retailers create, especially during the biggest shopping season of the year. With Black Friday and Cyber Monday around the corner, retailers need to reliably connect with their customers, not just during the holiday rush, but all year long. Attentive's SMS and email marketing platform turns customer data into real conversations by capturing what matters most to each subscriber, then helping you reach them with the right message at exactly the right moment. No generic blasts, just personalized experiences that make customers feel truly understood. The result? Stronger connections that drive real results during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and beyond. Visit attentive.com to see what your customer data can do. What's been your, to date, the fundraising that you've done for the business?
We've raised about $17 million, including our Series A that we'll be announcing this summer.
Okay, that's great. Congratulations. One of the things you've mentioned is that, the use cases for the work that Tie does really goes beyond just websites. What other areas might brands be interested in using you?
Totally. Some brands actually use us to enrich their owned audiences. So basically taking their existing email subscribers and enriching those data points I mentioned, age, gender, income, marital status, and regularly updating their list to ensure they have the latest and greatest context about their owned audiences.
It's interesting. The market seems to be crowded. When I talk to either in my consulting work or, even on the podcast, the market from a retailer perspective for this kind of work seems crowded. Each of the providers that I talk to, many of them will say it's not so crowded because we're the best and we do things much more differently than others. What's the market like for brands like the ones I work with for services that you provide?
I think there is a key difference, one that we have over every other. I would say the first piece is, do they own their own proprietary graph, right? Most of these folks out there are renting a list from some data broker, which is a way to do it, but it's not the way to do it successfully for the long term. And so those types of folks will typically charge anywhere from 5 to 10 to 25 cents per identified visitor because they don't own the list, right? They don't have their own AI forming the graph for them. Whereas Revenue Roll differentiates because it owns all of this data and has the AI inside of it to form these profiles. And because we own it, we can charge 1 cent. So from a cost perspective, we are always superior. And then from the amount of data beyond the email that we can provide, age, gender, income, all of that context, plus the intent data I mentioned earlier, no one has that depth of understanding. There are a couple out there. I would say our only true competitor on a technology basis would be Wonderkin. The others are all simply renting lists and, in that 10 to 15% match rate. But they're just not on our level. And I think brands will see that, especially in the second half here as we start to market and position ourselves even stronger.
When you think about as you grow, how do you charge? Based on what? How do you charge the brands that work with you?
Yeah, totally. So we charge 1 to 2 cents per credit. And so a tie credit can be used for two different things. One, to de-anonymize a high intent website visitor, or two, to append those extra data points that I mentioned before, demographics, psychographics, intent, onto either identified visitors or your owned audiences. But brands at scale, we're typically at 1 cent or less, depending on their volume.
I asked you a question before about measurement, and I was going to dig a little bit more deeply there. One of the challenges for brands is understanding incrementality. It's hard when you implement technology onto your site to know whether or not you truly are generating incremental and sustainable revenue over time. Is that something that, folks are asking you about, and are you helping them through that challenge?
Absolutely. We heard that, when we came to market in 2023. And so soon after that, we built a very detailed attribution tool. It's on a line item basis where we actually show you, we added this person to your Klaviyo account, or we reactivated somebody who would not have been emailed. And then here is the subsequent order from your Shopify or your big commerce store. And so we can actually show true causation, right, between when we did our job versus when they checked out. I think marketers are some of the most sophisticated operators, and they are all about incrementality. We've done A/B tests. I know folks have put our product through like House and other incrementality platforms, and we perform because there is true incrementality with a product like ours, because you would not be able to contact these people if it wasn't for our product.
So as you've rebranded, what's in store for the next few months of, it's tough. It's a crowded market. It's tough enough to launch. It's also difficult in some cases to rebrand. So what's your planning for that?
It is difficult to rebrand. Honestly, I'm very proud of the team for executing on this in the first half. It was a large project. I think how we position ourselves moving forward, de-anonymization of site traffic, that will always be one of the things that we do. But a real enrichment and activation platform will do many other things. The next step for us is actually website personalization, not being the tool that does it, but providing those tools. Think IntelliGems, Rebuy, providing those tools with the key data points so that they can generate a different offer for a married man versus a single man, or different landing page for a man versus a woman, right? They don't have that data yet. They have the infrastructure to generate different types of personalization tests, but with our data, they could be running these tests across a much broader swath of the site visitor traffic and in a more sophisticated way. And so when you ask me where we go, I see our data being used across the MarTech stack. It's not just about de-anonymization and email flows. It's about ESPs, paid ads, CRO tools using our data to do their job better.
So in that scenario, you use the example of Rebuy. So in theory, if I'm the brand that uses Rebuy, I would be relying on Rebuy to create a partnership with you to better support me as the brand?
We would still work directly with the brand for now. But so they would use Tie. They would use Tie, but they would also connect Tie's data to the Rebuy application. So within Rebuy, they could tweak the A/B test that they're running based on the data that we provide.
And I said I was going to be the one to call your company by the wrong name.
Yeah, listen, 4 years, old habits die hard. What can I tell you?
There you go. Well, you have to get a jar, and every time you say revenue roll, you have to throw that $5 bill that you got from your grandfather. Who knows how many dollars you'll have when you're all done.
That was already used at the snack bar at elementary school, so that money's all gone, Mark.
So last question before we do our 2-minute drill. Starting a company is not easy. Are there a few things that were much more difficult for you to do than you ever expected they would be?
I think the early days, I had never raised money before. So that was definitely the first thing that I had to learn pretty quick, which was we had a great idea, but now we have to convince others that it is a life-changing or, 100x idea. Lucky for us, we came into market originally in 2021 during those boom years post-COVID. So we were able to successfully navigate that and continue to do so. So I think that was the first thing. And then the second thing, right, is I think as an owner, you have to remember, even in the early days, that you are responsible for everything, right? When you're an employee of a corporation, you have your job, you get your stuff done, and like, you close the laptop and you go have a weekend. That doesn't happen. And it will not happen to me for a long time, but I love it, right? I think you had to or I had to just embrace that 24/7 stress, but also fulfilling, process of being an entrepreneur. And I wouldn't have changed anything about it.
That's good. And I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs on the show and in other places. And, oftentimes folks realize they had a product they wanted to do or some kind of a business. And then they realized, when they hired employees, that they had so many people that were relying on them and their success for the families of the people that they had hired. And, that just adds more burden to the entrepreneur. But good. We're down to the 2-minute drill, 7 questions, 1-word answer. Are you ready, Michael?
I'm ready.
Okay. A brand that you admire or that inspires you?
Caraway stocks my entire kitchen. So whenever they come out with something, we buy it.
Favorite app on your phone?
If I say ChatGPT, are you going to judge me?
No, not at all.
Well, it's either that or my PlayPoint app, which is how I book my paddle matches down here.
Okay. Last website other than Amazon that you shopped from?
I like Thuma. We actually just furnished one of our bedrooms down here. Thuma is a really great home goods brand.
Okay. Something that you're not good at, but wish that you were?
I feel like I could always get better at racket sports. I've fallen in love with them, and I'm nowhere near good enough yet, but I'm training and taking some lessons and coaching.
So tennis and pickleball and padel?
Never pickleball, Mark. That's a sin. Never pickleball.
You're too
Paddle, though,
young
yeah.
for pickleball? Is that it?
It just doesn't do it for me. I don't know what to tell you. I like paddle a lot. It hasn't hit New York as hard as it hits Miami, but it
Yep.
will soon.
Charitable organization that you're passionate about?
Recently, I would say we've donated to things for orphans, things like that. But I haven't been as involved. I would say in college, what my fraternity was really focused on was supporting veterans. I think that was really a mission that I want to get back to.
Okay. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Oh, reading people's minds. That would just make sales so much easier.
Other than family, what's your most prized possession?
I don't really own something that I'm like, is that a bad answer? Like I don't.
No, I've had people who say, you know what, I'm not a materialistic person. I don't have a prized possession. So all good. Michael, this was great. Thank you very much for doing it. Congratulations on the work that your team has done and you've done on the rebrand and, building out your business.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Michael Diesu for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Number 1, Michael spoke about his parents and how they were present for him. We have so many distractions in our lives, so it's a good reminder if you have young kids or grandkids and you're spending time with them, be there for them and don't let your phone or other things get between you and they. I'm watching my granddaughter play with toys and her favorites are a cell phone and a TV remote control. Maybe there's a message there. And number 2, as a marketing and financial person, I love the idea of zero-based budgeting. So many companies build the New Year's budget starting with what they spent in the prior year, rather than truly going line by line and seeing what needs to be spent in order to achieve your goals. Don't be afraid to move on from something that you once thought important, but has turned out not to be. Your cash is limited, so build that budget as best as possible from the ground up and be discerning where you spend your money. And number 3, regardless of the business you're in and the role you have, there's always a bit of sales and negotiation. Hone your skills here and it will serve you well. Realize that whether you're selling a product or a service or simply collaborating with team members, there's a bit of selling and negotiating in all that we do. Be a good listener, but also stick to your convictions of what will work and why. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, the devil is in the details.